I used to think time could bury everything, that if I ran far enough, if I lived long enough, the past would dissolve like footprints in the sand. But here I am, 70 years old, and the footsteps I left when I was 18 are still etched into the ground like scars. I was born in a quiet suburban town in the late 1950s. My parents were strict but steady. My younger brother Samuel followed me like a shadow, and our small house smelled of my mother's baking every Sunday. I should have been grateful, but at 18, gratitude felt like a cage. I wanted freedom. I wanted love. And when Michael appeared charming, reckless, promising me a world beyond our small town, I thought he was the answer to every prayer I hadn't yet dared to whisper. One rainy night, suitcase in hand, I left. My mother begged me to stay. My father's face turned to stone, and Samuel stood at the window, his palm pressed to the glass as I walked away. I told myself I'd return, that it was only the beginning of my story, not the end of theirs. But the door I closed that night stayed closed for over 50 years. Michael's promises withered fast, within a year. His charm curdled into anger, his touch into fists. I bore a daughter, Anna, into a world of chaos and shouting, and when he left us for good, I was 22, alone, and already aged by regret. I worked shifts at diners, cleaned motel rooms, lived in apartments where the wallpaper peeled and the neighbors screamed through thin walls. I kept telling myself I'd write to my family, that I'd return when I was stronger. But shame is a heavy chain. Every year that passed made the distance wider, the silence harder to break. Anna grew up without grandparents, without the warmth of family gatherings. She asked about them sometimes, her small face tilted up at me, and I told her vague stories, half-truths coated in regret. I wanted to go back, but the voice in my head always said, "Not yet. They won't forgive you. Not yet." When I turned 50, I received a letter I almost didn't open. It was from Samuel. Inside were only a few words. Mother passed away last spring. She waited for you until the end. The paper blurred in my hands. I pressed it to my chest and sobbed like the girl I had once been. I wanted to rush home then, but fear of Samuel's anger kept me away. So I stayed silent. Again. 2 decades later, I could no longer escape myself. At 70, I returned. I stood in front of the house I had abandoned. Now Samuel's home, my knees trembling. Samuel opened the door. His hair was gray, his frame broader but hardened by time, and his eyes God. His eyes were full of a coldness I had never seen. "You don't belong here," he said flatly. "Sam," my voice cracked. "Please, just let me. You left us." He cut me off. "You left her. She waited for you, Lorraine, and you never came." I wanted to explain, to beg, but shame choked me. Before he could close the door, a woman's voice called from inside. "Samuel, wait." His wife, Elaine, appeared. Her eyes were kinder, softer. "She left something for you," Elaine said. Samuel stiffened, but she placed a hand on his arm. "Your mother. She left a diary. Samuel has kept it all these years." My breath caught. A diary from Mother Samuel's face darkened. "That's none of her business," he snapped, but Elaine looked at me, her gaze unwavering. "I think it is." That night, I lay awake in a motel room, the weight of those words crushing me. A diary. My mother's voice, trapped in ink, waiting for me all these years. What had she written? Secrets, memories, forgiveness, or condemnation? For the first time in decades, I felt something stir inside me. Not fear, not shame, but a desperate need. I had run all my life, but now I knew I had to stop running. I had to read that diary. The next morning, I returned to Samuel's house. I could see the tension in the set of his shoulders as he opened the door. Elaine hovered behind him, her hands folded together as if in prayer. "Please," I whispered. "Let me see it. Just the diary." Samuel's jaw clenched. "Why should you get to read her words? You weren't here when she wrote them. You weren't here when she needed you." "I know," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I know I failed her. But please, if she left anything for me, don't keep it locked away." For a long moment, the silence between us felt like another lifetime of punishment. Then Elaine stepped forward, touching his arm gently. "Sam, she deserves to know." Reluctantly, he turned and disappeared inside. When he returned, he held a worn, leather-bound book in his hands. He pressed it against his chest, as though it was alive, as though handing it over might kill him. Finally, with a bitter sigh, he thrust it toward me. "Take it. But don't come crying to me when you realize what she really thought of you." I clutched the diary like a lifeline and hurried away before he could change his mind. Back in my motel room, I sat on the bed, trembling as I opened the first page. The handwriting was my mother's, delicate but firm. Each letter familiar yet distant, like hearing her voice through a long corridor of time. "My dearest Lorraine," the first entry began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. There are truths I never had the courage to tell you while I was alive. Perhaps I was wrong to keep them from you, but I did it out of love, though I know love can wound as deeply as hate." I pressed my palm to the page, my throat tight. She had written directly to me. As I read on, my breath faltered. She wrote of my father, not the man who raised me, but the truth I had never suspected. "Your father, the man you called Daddy, was not the one who gave you life. I made a mistake. Lorraine, a mistake in my youth. One night of betrayal that I carried with me for the rest of my days. He knew. He always knew. And though he chose to raise you as his own, the pain of that secret carved him hollow. His distance, his coldness, it was never you, my love. It was the ghost of my sin." The diary slipped from my hands onto the bed. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. All my life, I had wondered why my father looked at me with something I could never name, why his affection felt restrained, his smiles rare. And now I knew I was not his by blood. Shaking, I picked the diary back up. Samuel found out when he was just 15. The entry continued. His father told him, thinking the boy should know the truth. I begged him not to, but he insisted. He said Sam needed to be strong, to carry the burden in case whispers ever reached our town. My poor boy has lived with that secret ever since. If he looks at you with anger, remember it is not just your leaving he resents. It is the weight of knowing what you did not. I gasped aloud, my hand flying to my mouth. Samuel had carried this since boyhood. No wonder he looked at me with such bitterness. Not only had I abandoned him, he had been forced to protect me from a truth I never even knew. Tears streamed down my face, blurring the words. I kept reading, "My darling girl." I wanted to tell you myself so many times, but I feared losing you. I feared the shame would consume us all. I prayed you would never learn the truth. But if you are reading this, then fate has decided otherwise. Please, Lorraine, do not let this knowledge destroy you. You were never unwanted. You were the piece of me I loved most. I pressed the diary to my chest and sobbed until my throat burned. I thought of my father, of every cold glance, every stern silence. I thought of Samuel, 15 years old, bearing the weight of an adult's guilt. And I thought of my mother, torn between silence and truth, her love twisted into secrecy. That evening, I went back to Samuel. He was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, his expression hard. I read it, I said, my voice trembling. He didn't look up. "Then you know." "Yes," I whispered. "I know why Father was distant. I know what he told you, and I know why you hate me." At that, his eyes snapped up to mine, blazing. "You don't know what it's like, Lorraine. To be 15 and told your sister isn't really your sister? To carry that secret while you got to live free, running off with some man, leaving us to drown in silence." "I didn't know," I pleaded. "I didn't know any of it." "That's the point," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You didn't know because I had to keep it from you. You got to live in ignorance while I carried the weight, and then you left me alone with them with their silence, their shame. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Tears filled my eyes again. "Sam, I'm sorry. I can't undo what happened. But I can face it now. We can face it together." He shook his head, his shoulders trembling. "You think it's that simple? You think reading her diary makes up for 50 years? "No," I said softly. "It doesn't, but it's a start." For a long moment, he just stared at me, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Then he looked away, muttering, "You should have stayed gone." I left his house, the diary clutched against my chest. His words cut deep, but beneath his anger, I saw something else, something fragile, something wounded. And I knew this wasn't the end. The diary still held more pages, more truths waiting to be uncovered. And though they might break me, I had to know. Because only in knowing could I hope to mend what had been shattered for so long. Back in my motel room, I sat with the diary on my lap, staring at it as though it might burn me if I opened it again. The pages I had already read had shaken everything I thought I knew, but something inside me, something stronger than fear, pushed me onward. My mother's voice still lingered in my ears. "Do not let this knowledge destroy you." I turned the page. The handwriting grew shakier, as though her illness had begun to creep into her bones. "There is one more truth," she wrote. "The woman who bore you, your blood mother, lives. I saw her once. She had made a new life in another town, with another man. When I confronted her, she said she never wanted you. that you were a mistake she wished to forget. I struck her. I had never hit another person in my life, but I struck her for daring to dismiss you. You are not her mistake. Lorraine, you are my salvation." The words blurred as fresh tears welled in my eyes. My real mother had cast me aside before I'd even taken my first breath. My heart ached. But then, I clung to the rest my mother had chosen me. Whatever her sins, she had loved me fiercely, enough to fight for me. I kept reading. Your real father came once. The next entry revealed. He knocked on our door, asking to see you. He wanted to claim you, to raise you. But I told him no. I told him you were mine, that he had no place in our lives. He left broken-hearted. I never saw him again. I learned later he died not long after. This, too, I carry as my sin. I gasped, clutching the diary to my chest. My father, my real father, had tried to find me, and my mother, the only mother I'd ever known, had shut the door in his face. It was betrayal, wrapped in love. She had protected me, yes, but also robbed me of a chance to know the man who had wanted me. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. The motel room felt suffocating. I needed answers more than words on a page. I needed to see her. The woman who had given me life but no love. With trembling hands, I made a few phone calls, followed vague leads, and within days, I found an address 2 towns over. Margaret, that was her name. When I arrived, the house was modest but tidy. Flower pots neatly arranged on the porch steps. My legs shook as I climbed them and knocked. The door creaked open. A frail woman in her 80s peered out. Her hair was pulled back into a thin bun, her face lined but sharp, her eyes startlingly familiar my eyes, but colder. "Yes," she asked curtly. "My name is Lorraine," I said, my throat dry. "I believe you knew my mother once." Her gaze flickered. For a heartbeat, I saw recognition. Then she scoffed. "So you found me. What of it?" I swallowed hard. "You're my biological mother." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And what do you expect? An embrace, tears I gave you up. Your mother wanted you. I didn't. End of story." Her words sliced through me like glass. "How could you?" I whispered, my eyes filling. "How could you look at a child and call her a mistake?" For the first time, her mask cracked. A flicker of something shame, regret crossed her face. But she quickly hardened again. "I wasn't meant to be a mother. I made my choice. You were her responsibility, not mine." I felt hot tears spill down my cheeks, but I stood tall. "You may have given me blood, but she gave me love. She was more of a mother than you could ever be." Margaret's lips tightened. "If that's true, why are you here?" "Because I needed to see you," I said. I needed to know what kind of woman could abandon her child so easily. And now, I do. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "Your father," she said, her tone brittle. "He tried to see you. He wanted you. She kept him away." I froze, my chest heaving. "I know," I whispered, without looking back. I read it in her diary. I walked down the steps, my vision blurred by tears. By the time I reached the car, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. For days, I could not eat, could not sleep. My mother's love, my father's absence, Margaret's coldness, all of it crashed down on me. I was drowning in truths that came too late. Finally, I returned to Samuel. He opened the door with his usual hardness, but when he saw my face, his expression softened just slightly. "I saw her," I said, my voice raw. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "And she didn't want me. She never did. But she told me about him, my father. He wanted me. Sam. He came back, and Mother turned him away." Samuel's shoulders sagged. He sat heavily at the table, his face pale. "All these years," he murmured. "All these years she carried that." I sat across from him, clutching the diary. We both carried it. "Sam, you carried the secret, and I carried the silence. Both of us were broken by it for a moment. The air between us was thick with years of anger, grief, and loss. Then, to my astonishment, Samuel's face crumpled. His hands covered his eyes, and he began to weep. I reached across the table, my own tears falling freely. Tentatively, I placed my hand over his. For the first time in over 50 years, he didn't pull away. We sat there, two wounded souls bound by blood and betrayal, finally breaking beneath the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the beginning of something I had thought lost forever. The days that followed felt different. Samuel and I weren't healed. How could we be after half a century of silence? But there was a shift, fragile yet undeniable. We met for coffee at his kitchen table, sometimes speaking, sometimes just sitting in shared silence. And for the first time, it wasn't a silence filled with resentment. It was the silence of two people learning how to breathe again. At night, I returned to the diary. Its final pages trembled in my hands, as though my mother's spirit hovered nearby, urging me forward. Her writing grew uneven, the ink blotched in places where her strength must have faltered. "My girl," one of the last entries began. "If you are still reading, then you have carried this far. Do not let bitterness claim what little time remains. Betrayal may begin the story, but forgiveness must finish it. If Samuel cannot forgive you, forgive him anyway. And if you cannot forgive yourself, then let these words be my forgiveness. I loved you, Lorraine, from the first moment until my last breath." I closed the diary and pressed it against my heart, my tears soaking its leather cover. Those words were more than ink. They were a benediction, a lifeline. Still, forgiveness is never born in an instant. It is a practice, a decision made again and again. Samuel remained guarded, his grief too deep to vanish overnight. But one Sunday, as we sat with untouched coffee between us, he finally spoke. "I hated you for leaving," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But I think I hated you more for being free. You ran, and I stayed. I stayed and carried everything: Father's silence, Mother's sickness, the secret that hollowed me out. And when she died, I thought the least you could do was come back. But you didn't. I lowered my gaze, ashamed. I know. I can't undo it. Sam, I can only tell you I regret it every day. If I could trade places with that 18-year-old girl, I would. But I can't. I can only stand here now, asking you to see me not as who I was, but as who I am. His jaw worked as he struggled with his own storm of emotions. Finally, his eyes softened just a fraction. Maybe that's enough, he whispered. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a door, cracked open. A week later, I gathered Anna and her young son in my small kitchen. My grandson played with toy cars at the table while Anna listened, her brow furrowed. I told them everything: the diary, Margaret, the truth about my father. When I finished, Anna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Mom, she said softly, I don't care whose blood runs in your veins. You are my mother. You raised me. You fought for me. That's all that matters. Her words lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. My grandson climbed into my lap then, his small arms wrapping around my neck. You're my grandma, he said simply, as if that was the only truth in the world. And maybe it was. But there was one last step I knew I had to take. A few days later, Samuel drove me to the cemetery. The air was crisp, the trees shedding their last golden leaves. We walked together to our mother's grave, the diary clutched in my hands. My knees nearly gave way as I knelt before the headstone. Mom, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for every letter I never wrote, every phone call I never made. But I read your words. I know your heart. And I forgive you for your silence, for turning him away, for everything. I forgive you, and I hope you can forgive me too. Tears streamed down my face as I placed the diary on her grave. The sun broke through the clouds just then, a shaft of white light falling across the stone. I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder, hear her voice whispering in my ear. When I looked up, Samuel was standing a few feet away, his eyes glistening. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward and rested his hand on my shoulder. No words, just presence. And in that moment, it was enough. That night, I sat in my small living room, the silence no longer suffocating. For the first time in decades, I felt free not because the pain was gone, but because I had faced it, spoken it, and finally let it breathe. I am 70 years old now. My hair is silver, my body slower, but my spirit, oh, my spirit feels lighter than it ever has. I can't reclaim the years I lost. I can't change the choices I made, but I can live the days I have left with honesty, with love, with forgiveness. And if you're listening to me now, carrying your own regrets, let me tell you this: don't wait 50 years to face them. Don't let silence and shame chain you the way they chained me. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. Forgive, even if it feels impossible. Because in the end, it isn't betrayal that defines us. It's what we do with it. I thought running away at 18 was the choice that made me free. But freedom came only at 70 when I stopped running, when I turned to face the past, when I chose forgiveness over fear. So if my story touched you, If you see even a fragment of yourself in my journey, I ask you to share it. Leave me a comment, I would love to hear your story too. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so we can keep walking through these truths together.